Most people assume plants need soil to grow. Walk into any garden center, and you'll see bags of potting mix, compost, and topsoil stacked high. But here's something that challenges that assumption. Commercial tomato farms in the Netherlands produce over 80 kilograms of tomatoes per square meter each year, and many of them don't use a single handful of soil. Hydroponics is the practice of growing plants without soil. Instead, plants are grown in water enriched with dissolved nutrients. The roots either sit directly in this nutrient solution or are supported by inert materials like perlite, coconut coir, or rock wool. These materials hold the plant in place but don't provide nutrition. All the food comes from the water. This isn't a new idea. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon may have used hydroponic principles. Scientists in the 1800s grew plants in water to figure out what nutrients they actually needed. But modern hydroponics as a commercial system really took off in the mid-20th century, and today it's used to grow lettuce, herbs, tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, and even strawberries on a massive scale. So why does this matter? Because hydroponics allows farmers to grow food in places where soil is poor, contaminated, or non-existent. It uses up to 90% less water than conventional field farming. It eliminates soil-borne diseases and enables year-round production in controlled environments, which stabilizes food supply and reduces dependence on long-distance shipping. At its core, hydroponics works because plants don't actually eat soil. Soil is just a medium that holds water, air, and nutrients. Hydroponics cuts out the middleman. It delivers what plants need directly to the roots in a controlled, efficient way. The plant doesn't know the difference. It only knows whether it's getting the resources it needs to photosynthesize, grow, and produce fruit. Understanding hydroponics starts with understanding what plants really need to survive. And once you break it down, you realize soil is optional. Water, nutrients, oxygen, and light are not. Let's start with a fundamental question. What does soil actually do? Most people think of soil as plant food, but soil itself isn't food. Plants can't eat organic matter directly. A plant root can absorb a piece of decomposed leaf or a chunk of manure. What it can absorb are the minerals that result from the breakdown of that organic matter, and those minerals are dissolved in water. Soil serves four main functions in traditional agriculture. First, it anchors a plant so it doesn't fall over. Second, it holds water and releases it slowly to the roots. Third, it contains air pockets that provide oxygen to root zone. Fourth, it acts as a reservoir for nutrients, which are released through microbial activity and chemical processes. But here's the key insight. None of those functions require soil specifically. They can all be replicated by other means. Plants make their own food through photosynthesis. They take carbon dioxide from the air, water from their roots, and light energy from the sun, and they convert those into sugars. That's their actual food. What they get from the soil or from a hydroponic system are the raw building blocks, minerals like nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, plus trace elements like iron and manganese. In hydroponics, anchorage is provided by inert growing media or support structures. Water is delivered directly and constantly. Oxygen is supplied by aerating the nutrient solution or by using systems that expose roots to air. And nutrients are dissolved in precise ratios in the water itself. There's no biological complexity to manage, no waiting for microbes to break down compost, no guessing about soil pH or nutrient tie-up. The grower controls everything. This is both the advantage and the challenge of hydroponics. You gain precision and efficiency, but you also take on full responsibility for every aspect of plant nutrition. Soil-based farming works with natural systems. Hydroponics replaces them with engineered ones. And when those engineered systems are managed well, they can outperform soil in almost every measurable way. Faster growth, higher yields, cleaner produce, and far less water waste. The misconception that plants need soil comes from thousands of years of agriculture being soil-based. But in reality, plants need minerals, water, oxygen, and light. Soil is just one way to deliver those. Hydroponics is another, and in many cases, it's a better one. Roots are the foundation of any plant, whether it's growing in a field or a hydroponic channel. But in hydroponics, the role of the root system becomes even more critical because there's no soil buffer. Everything the plant needs must be absorbed directly from the water, and everything the plant doesn't need can build up quickly if the system isn't balanced. In a soil environment, roots grow through particles of clay, sand, and organic matter. They explore a three-dimensional space, seeking out pockets of moisture and nutrients. Root hairs increase the surface area for absorption. Beneficial fungi and bacteria often colonize the root zone, helping with nutrient uptake and protecting against disease. In hydroponics, roots grow into water or into a moist, inert medium. There's no need to search for water because it's always available. This changes the structure of the root system. Hydroponic roots are often wider, thicker, and less branched than soil roots. They don't need the same level of fine root hair development because nutrients are delivered in solution, not locked in soil particles. But roots still have three essential jobs. First, they anchor the plant. Even in a hydroponic system, the plant needs stability, especially as it grows taller and heavier with fruit. Second, they absorb water. Plants are mostly water, and they lose water constantly through transpiration. Roots must replace that water to prevent wilting. Third, they absorb dissolved nutrients. This happens through two processes: passive diffusion, where nutrients move from areas of high concentration to low concentration, and active transport, where the plant uses energy to pull in specific nutrients even when concentrations are low. Here's what many beginners overlook. Roots also need oxygen, a lot of it. In soil, oxygen comes from air pockets between soil particles. In hydroponics, oxygen must be dissolved in the water or provided by exposing roots to air. If the nutrient solution becomes stagnant or too warm, oxygen levels drop. Roots suffocate. This is called root hypoxia, and it leads to root rot, stunted growth, and plant death. Healthy hydroponic roots are white or light tan. They're firm, not slimy. They smell earthy or neutral, not sour or rotten. If roots turn brown, mushy, or develop a bad odor, it's usually a sign of low oxygen, high water temperature, or pathogen infection. One of the biggest advantages of hydroponics is that you can see the roots. In soil, they're hidden. In hydroponics, especially in systems like deep water culture, the roots are visible. You can monitor their health in real time. You can catch problems early, and you can adjust the system before the plant shows above-ground symptoms. Root health is plant health. In hydroponics, managing the root zone is the single most important factor in determining whether your system succeeds or fails. In soil-based farming, nutrients come from decomposition, mineralization, and fertilizer applications. Organic matter breaks down. Microbes convert it into plant-available forms, and roots absorb what they need. It's a slow, buffered process. Nutrient availability depends on soil type, pH, moisture, temperature, and microbial activity. Hydroponics eliminates all of that variability. Instead of waiting for nutrients to become available, the grower dissolves them directly into water. The result is a nutrient solution that contains everything the plant needs, in the exact ratios required, at concentrations the plant can immediately absorb. This is done using water-soluble fertilizers. These are not the same as the granular fertilizers used on lawns or in gardens. Hydroponic fertilizers are highly refined. They dissolve completely, leaving no residue. They're formulated to provide a balanced mix of macronutrients and micronutrients. Macronutrients are the elements plants need in large quantities. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are the big three. Nitrogen drives leafy growth. Phosphorus supports root development and flowering. Potassium regulates water use and strengthens cell walls. Then there are secondary macronutrients: calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. Calcium builds cell walls. Magnesium is central to chlorophyll. Sulfur is part of certain amino acids and proteins. Micronutrients are needed in much smaller amounts, but they're just as essential. Iron, manganese, zinc, copper, boron, and molybdenum all play specific roles in enzyme function, photosynthesis, and nutrient metabolism. A deficiency in any of these can limit growth, even if everything else is perfect. In a well-designed hydroponic system, all of these nutrients are present in solution at all times. The plant takes what it needs as it needs it. There's no competition from weeds. There's no leaching into groundwater. And there's no guesswork about whether the soil has enough phosphorus or whether last year's lime application raised the pH enough. But this precision comes with responsibility. If the nutrient solution is too concentrated, It can burn the roots or cause nutrient imbalances. If it's too dilute, the plant won't get enough to support growth. If the ratios are off, one nutrient can block the uptake of another. For example, too much potassium can interfere with calcium absorption, leading to problems like blossom end rot in tomatoes. Most commercial growers use pre-mixed hydroponic nutrients that are formulated for specific crops or growth stages. A vegetative stage formula will have more nitrogen to support leaf growth. A flowering stage formula will have more phosphorus and potassium to support fruit and flower development. Nutrient solutions are typically prepared in 2 or 3 separate stock tanks and then mixed into the main reservoir. This prevents certain nutrients from reacting with each other and precipitating out a solution. Calcium and sulfate, for example, will form gypsum if mixed in concentrated form. The beauty of this system is control. In soil, you apply fertilizer and hope it gets to the roots. In hydroponics, you deliver it directly, and because you're delivering it in water, uptake is faster, more efficient, and more predictable. Every plant, whether the head of lettuce or a 2-meter-tall tomato vine, is built from the same basic elements. Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen come from air and water. Everything else comes from the nutrient solution. Let's break down what each nutrient does and what happens when a plant doesn't get enough. Nitrogen is the engine of growth. It's a key component of amino acids, proteins, and chlorophyll. Without enough nitrogen, plants grow slowly, leaves turn pale green or yellow, and older leaves die off first. Too much nitrogen causes excessive leafy growth, weak stems, and delayed flowering. In hydroponics, nitrogen is usually supplied as nitrate or ammonium. Phosphorus is essential for energy transfer. It's part of ADP, the molecule that powers cellular processes. It also supports root development and flowering. Phosphorus deficiency shows up as dark green or purplish leaves, stunted growth, and poor root systems. It's less common in hydroponics than in soil because soil often locks up phosphorus in forms plants can't use. Potassium regulates water movement in and out of cells. It strengthens cell walls, improves disease resistance, and enhances fruit quality. Deficiency causes leaf edges to yellow and curl, weak stems, and poor fruit development. Potassium is highly mobile in the plant, so deficiency symptoms show up in older leaves first. Calcium builds cell walls and membranes. It's critical for new growth. Unlike other nutrients, calcium doesn't move easily within the plant. That means a deficiency shows up in the newest growth, tips of leaves, young fruit, and growing points. Blossom end rot in tomatoes is a classic calcium deficiency. Even when there's enough calcium in the solution, the problem is often poor transpiration or inconsistent watering, which limits calcium transport. Magnesium is the central atom in every chlorophyll molecule. Without it, photosynthesis stops. Deficiency causes interveinal chlorosis, where the veins stay green but the tissue between them turns yellow. It typically shows up in older leaves first. Sulfur is part of certain amino acids and vitamins. Deficiency is rare in hydroponics, but causes yellowing of new leaves and stunted growth. Then there are the micronutrients. Iron is needed for chlorophyll synthesis and shows deficiency as yellowing of new leaves with green veins. Manganese is involved in photosynthesis and enzyme activation. Zinc supports hormone production and protein synthesis. Copper plays a role in respiration and cell wall formation. Boron is essential for cell division and calcium uptake. Molybdenum is needed for nitrogen metabolism. Each of these nutrients has a specific role, and because they work together, an imbalance in one can affect the availability or function of others. For example, high phosphorus can reduce zinc uptake. High potassium can reduce magnesium and calcium uptake. High iron can reduce manganese availability. In soil, nutrient interactions are buffered by the soil's cation exchange capacity and microbial activity. In hydroponics, there's no buffer. If the ratios are wrong, problems appear quickly. This is why hydroponic nutrient formulas are carefully balanced and why regular monitoring is essential. The goal is not just to provide nutrients, but to provide them in the right amounts at the right time in the right balance. When that happens, plants grow faster and healthier than they ever could in soil. Water is the most important input in hydroponics. It's not just a carrier for nutrients. It's the medium through which every physiological process happens. Plants are made mostly of water. A head of lettuce is about 95% water by weight. A tomato is around 94%. That water comes from the roots. It moves up through the xylem to the leaves, where it evaporates through tiny pores called stomata. This process, called transpiration, is what drives nutrient uptake. As water evaporates from the leaves, it creates a vacuum that pulls more water and the nutrients dissolved in it up from the roots. In hydroponics, water is always available to the roots. There's no dry period, no wilting, no water stress. This means a plant can transpire continuously, as long as environmental conditions allow. And continuous transpiration means continuous nutrient uptake. This is one reason hydroponic plants grow faster than soil-grown plants. In soil, water availability fluctuates. After a heavy rain or irrigation, the soil is saturated, then it dries out. Plants experience cycles of feast and famine. In hydroponics, the supply is constant. Growth is never limited by water availability. But constant water availability also creates a risk. If the roots are submerged in stagnant water with no air exchange, they suffocate. This is why oxygenation is critical, which we'll cover in the next segment. For now, the key point is that water in hydroponics is not just water, it's a delivery system. It carries dissolved oxygen, dissolved nutrients, and dissolved carbon dioxide to the roots. It also carries away waste products like root exudates. Water quality matters. Tap water varies widely depending on location. Some municipal water has high levels of chlorine or chloramine, which can harm beneficial microbes if you're using organic hydroponic methods. Some well water has high levels of calcium, magnesium, or iron, which can throw off nutrient ratios. Some water sources have high sodium or heavy metals, which can damage plants over time. Most commercial hydroponic operations use filtered or reverse osmosis water to start with a clean baseline. This allows precise control over nutrient concentrations. Hobbyists can often get away with tap water, especially if they let it sit for 24 hours to allow chlorine to evaporate. Temperature is also critical. Warmer water holds less dissolved oxygen. If the nutrient solution gets above 22 degrees Celsius, oxygen levels drop and root health declines. Most hydroponic systems aim to keep water temperature between 18 and 21 degrees Celsius. Water is also the variable that growers adjust most frequently. As plants grow, they consume water and nutrients at different rates. On a hot day with high light, a tomato plant might drink several liters of water. On a cool, cloudy day, it might drink a fraction of that. This changes the concentration of nutrients in the solution, a concept we measure using electrical conductivity, or EC, which we'll discuss in a later segment. The bottom line is this. In hydroponics, water is infrastructure. It's a highway that delivers everything the plant needs. Keep it clean, keep it oxygenated, keep it at the right temperature, and the plant will thrive. This is where many new hydroponic growers fail. They focus on nutrients, on light, on pH, and they forget that roots need to breathe. Roots respire just like leaves. They take in oxygen and release carbon dioxide. This respiration is what powers the active transport of nutrients into root cells. Without oxygen, roots can't generate the energy they need to absorb nutrients efficiently. Growth slows. Roots turn brown and slimy. Pathogens like Pythium, which thrive in low oxygen environments, take hold. The plant wilts, even though it's sitting in water. This is called root rot, and it's one of the most common causes of failure in hydroponics. In soil, oxygen comes from air pockets. Well-drained soil has good soil structure, aggregates of particles with spaces between them. Water drains through, and air fills the gaps. Plant roots grow into these spaces and absorb oxygen directly. In hydroponics, there's no soil structure. The roots are either suspended in water, surrounded by a moist inert medium, or periodically flooded and drained. Oxygen must be actively managed. There are several ways to do this. The most common is aeration. In deep water culture systems, air pumps push air through air stones submerged in the nutrient reservoir. The bubbles increase the surface area of the water exposed to air, allowing oxygen to dissolve into the solution. A well-aerated reservoir can maintain dissolved oxygen levels above 6 milligrams per liter, which is ideal for most plants. In nutrient film technique, or NFT, a thin film of nutrient solution flows over the roots. The roots are partially exposed to air, so they get both water and oxygen. The flow rate is carefully controlled. Too fast, and the roots don't have time to absorb nutrients. Too slow, and oxygen levels drop. Ebb and flow systems flood the root zone with nutrient solution, then drain it away. During the drain cycle, air is pulled into the growing medium, oxygenating the roots. This cycle repeats several times a day. Aeroponic systems spray a fine mist of nutrient solution onto bare roots suspended in air. The roots are almost always exposed to air, with only brief contact with water. This provides the highest oxygen levels of any hydroponic system, but it's also the most technically demanding. Temperature is critical to oxygen management. Cold water holds more dissolved oxygen than warm water. At 15 degrees Celsius, water can hold over 10 milligrams per liter of oxygen. At 25 degrees, it can hold less than 8. This is why most hydroponic systems include chillers or insulation to keep water temperature down, especially in warm climates. Another factor is biofilm. Over time, roots, nutrients, and water create an environment where bacteria and algae can grow. Some of this is beneficial. Some of it consumes oxygen. If biofilm builds up too much, it can coat roots and reduce oxygen availability. This is why system cleanliness matters. Reservoirs should be drained and cleaned regularly. Tubing and pumps should be inspected and flushed. Oxygenation is invisible. You can't see dissolved oxygen. You can measure with a meter, but most small-scale growers don't. So they learn to watch the roots. Healthy roots are white, firm, and smell neutral. Oxygen-starved roots are brown, slimy, and smell like decay. Roots are the plant's lifeline. And in hydroponics, oxygen is the root's lifeline. Ignore it, and no amount of nutrients or light will save your crop. If you manage only two things in hydroponics, manage pH and EC, get these right, and most of the problems solve themselves. Get them wrong, and even a perfect nutrient formula won't help. Let's start with pH. The term stands for potential of hydrogen. It's a measure how acidic or alkaline a solution is on a scale from 0 to 14. 7 is neutral. Below 7 is acidic. Above 7 is alkaline. Why does this matter? Because pH affects nutrient solubility. Most hydroponic nutrients are only available to plants within a narrow pH range, typically between 5.5 and 6.5. Outside this range, nutrients can precipitate out of solution or become chemically bound in forms the plant can't absorb. For example, iron is readily available at low pH but becomes unavailable above pH 7. Phosphorus is most available between 6 and 7, but can precipitate with calcium at higher pH levels. If your pH drifts too high, you might see iron deficiency even though there's plenty of iron in the solution. The plant just can't access it. pH in hydroponics is not stable. As plants absorb nutrients, they release hydrogen ions or hydroxide ions, which shift the pH. Some nutrients, like ammonium, lower pH when absorbed. Others, like nitrate, raise it. Environmental factors like temperature and CO2 levels also influence pH. This is why growers check pH daily and adjust it as needed. pH is adjusted using acids to lower it or bases to raise it. Phosphoric acid and nitric acid are common pH-down solutions. Potassium hydroxide or potassium carbonate are used to raise pH. Adjustments are made in small increments because overcorrecting causes wild swings that stress the plant. Now let's talk about EC, or electrical conductivity. This measures the total concentration of dissolved salts in the water. Hydroponic nutrients are salts. When they dissolve, they create ions that conduct electricity. The more concentrated the solution, the higher the conductivity. EC is measured in millisiemens per centimeter or microsiemens. Different crops have different ideal EC ranges. Lettuce, for example, grows well at 1.2 to 1.8 millisiemens. Tomatoes prefer 2.0 to 3.5. Seedlings need lower EC than mature plants. If EC is too low, the plant doesn't get enough nutrients. Growth slows and deficiency symptoms appear. If EC is too high, the solution is too concentrated. This creates osmotic stress. The plant struggles to absorb water because the water outside the roots has a higher solute concentration than the water inside. In extreme cases, this pulls water out of the plant, causing wilting even though the roots are submerged. EC also changes over time. As plants absorb water and nutrients, they don't absorb them at the same rate. On a hot day, a plant might take up a lot of water, but fewer nutrients. This concentrates the solution and raises EC. On a cool day, the plant might absorb more nutrients relative to water, which lowers EC. Evaporation from the reservoir also concentrates the solution. This is why growers monitor EC daily and top up the reservoir with either plain water or diluted nutrient solution to keep EC in range. Some systems use automated dosing pumps that adjust EC in real time. pH and EC are interconnected. Adjusting pH can change EC slightly because the acids and bases used are themselves salts, and changes in nutrient concentration affect buffering capacity, which influences how stable the pH remains. The key is consistency. Check pH and EC at the same time each day. Log the values. Watch for trends. If pH keeps drifting up, there's a reason. If EC keeps climbing, the plant isn't drinking enough or evaporation is too high. These measurements tell you what's happening in the root zone. They're your early warning system. Nutrient absorption is not passive. It's not like dipping a sponge in water and waiting for it to soak in. Plant roots actively regulate what enters and what doesn't. This is critical because the nutrient solution contains everything, what the plant needs and what it doesn't. The root's job is to discriminate. There are two main mechanisms, diffusion and active transport. Diffusion is the simpler of the two. It's a passive process driven by concentration gradients. If there's a higher concentration of a nutrient outside the root than inside, and if the root membrane is permeable to that nutrient, it will naturally move inward. No energy required. This works for some nutrients under some conditions, but it's not sufficient on its own. Most nutrient uptake happens through active transport. This is an energy-dependent process. The plant uses ADP, the energy currency of cells, to power protein pumps in the root cell membrane. These pumps selectively grab specific nutrients and pull them into the root, even when the concentration inside the root is already higher than outside. This is how plants can accumulate potassium, nitrate, or phosphate to levels much higher than what's in the soil or nutrient solution. Active transport is why roots need oxygen. Without oxygen, they can't produce ADP. Without ADP, the pumps don't work. Nutrient uptake stops. The root membrane is not a simple barrier. It's a highly selective interface. Some nutrients move freely. Others require specific transport proteins. Some nutrients compete for the same transport pathways. For example, calcium, magnesium, and potassium all compete for uptake because they're all positively charged cations that use similar transport mechanisms. If one is present in very high concentrations, it can block the uptake of the others. This is why nutrient ratios matter. It's not enough to have all the nutrients present. They need to be balanced so that one doesn't outcompete another. Once inside the root, nutrients move through the plant in two pathways. The xylem carries water and dissolved nutrients upward from the roots to the shoots. This is driven by transpiration. The phloem carries sugars and some nutrients from the leaves to the rest of the plant, including developing fruit and roots. This is driven by pressure gradients created by sugar loading and unloading. Not all nutrients are equally mobile within the plant. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and magnesium are mobile. If the plant runs short, it can pull these nutrients out of older leaves and send them to new growth. This is why deficiency symptoms for these nutrients show up in older leaves first. Calcium, iron, and boron are mobile. Once they're deposited in a leaf or fruit, they stay there. If the plant becomes deficient, it can't relocate them. New growth suffers first. This is why calcium deficiency causes blossom and rot in young fruit, even when older leaves look fine. Understanding nutrient mobility helps diagnose problems. If you see yellowing in old leaves, think mobile nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium. If you see problems in new growth, think of mobile nutrients, calcium, iron, boron. The root zone is dynamic. It's not a static reservoir. Nutrients are being absorbed continuously. Concentrations shift, pH changes, oxygen levels fluctuate, and the plant adjusts its uptake in response to its needs, the environment, and the availability of resources. This is why hydroponics is both an art and a science. The science is understanding the mechanisms. The art is managing the system so that those mechanisms work optimally day after day, from seedling to harvest. Hydroponics is not a single system. It's a category of systems, each with different designs, advantages, and challenges. Choosing the right system depends on the crop, the scale, the budget, and the grower's experience level. Let's start with nutrient film technique, or NFT. This is one of the most common commercial systems, especially for leafy greens and herbs. Plants are placed in channels, and a thin film of nutrient solution flows continuously over the roots. The roots sit in the channel but are not submerged. The top portion of the root mass is exposed to air. This provides both water and oxygen efficiently. NFT systems are simple, scalable, and water efficient, but they're vulnerable to pump failures. If the flow stops, the roots dry out quickly, and if the channels aren't sloped correctly, solution can pool, reducing oxygenation. Deep water culture, or DWC, is the simplest system. Plants sit in net pots suspended above a reservoir of aerated nutrient solution. The roots hang down into the water. Air stones or diffusers bubble air through the solution continuously, keeping dissolved oxygen levels high. DWC is popular with hobbyists because it's cheap and easy to set up, but it requires constant aeration and water temperature must be carefully managed. It's best suited for smaller plants like lettuce, basil, or single tomato plants. Ebb and flow, also called flood and drain, is a versatile system. Plants grow in a tray filled with an inert medium like expanded clay pellets or perlite. Several times a day, a pump floods a tray with nutrient solution from a reservoir below. After a set period, the solution drains back into the reservoir. This cycle repeats. The flood delivers water and nutrients. The drain pulls fresh air into the medium, oxygenating the roots. Ebb and flow systems work well for a wide variety of crops and plant sizes, but they require a reliable pump and timer. If the drain clogs, the tray can overflow. If the pump fails, the plants dry out. Drip systems are the most widely used in commercial greenhouses, especially for fruiting crops like tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers. Plants grow in containers or bags filled with inert media like rockwool, cocoa coir, or perlite. Nutrient solution is delivered to each plant through a network of tubes and emitters. The solution drips slowly onto the growing medium, which holds moisture and nutrients around the roots. Excess solution drains away, either to waste or back to the reservoir for recirculation. Drip systems are highly scalable and allow precise control over watering frequency and volume, but they require good filtration to prevent emitters from clogging, and they can be labor-intensive to set up. Agri-Tech is the most advanced and least forgiving system. Roots are suspended in air inside a chamber. Nutrient solution is sprayed onto the roots as a fine mist at regular intervals. Because the roots are almost always exposed to air, oxygen availability is maximized. This leads to extremely fast growth and high yields. NASA has researched aeroponics for use in space, where water and weight are critical constraints. But aeroponic systems are expensive, complex, and vulnerable to failure. If the misting system clogs or the pump fails, roots dry out in minutes. It's not recommended for beginners. There are also hybrid systems that combine elements of multiple approaches. For example, some growers use a dripped-away system on top with a shallow reservoir underneath to catch runoff and provide a backup water source. Others use vertical towers that combine aspects of NFT and aeroponics. Each system has trade-offs. NFT is efficient but fragile. DWC is simple but limited in scale. Ebb and flow is versatile but requires good timing. Drip systems are scalable but need maintenance. Aeroponics is high performance but high risk. The choice depends on what you're growing, how much you're growing, and what infrastructure you have. A backyard hobbyist growing basil in a spare bedroom will use a different system than a commercial greenhouse producing 50,000 heads of lettuce per week. But all of these systems share the same fundamental principles. They deliver water, nutrients, and oxygen directly to the roots. They eliminate soil, and they give the grower precise control over the growing environment. That control is what makes hydroponics powerful. It's also what makes it demanding. There's no room for neglect, but for growers who pay attention, the results speak for themselves. Nutrient film technique, or NFT, deserves a closer look because it's the backbone of commercial leafy green production worldwide. Walk into a hydroponic lettuce operation in Arizona, Canada, or Singapore, and you'll likely see rows of NFT channels stretching the length of the greenhouse. The design is elegant in its simplicity. Plants sit in small net pots or foam inserts placed at regular intervals along slope channels. These channels are typically made from PVC pipe or molded plastic. At the high end of each channel, nutrient solution is pumped in. Gravity pulls the solution down the slope, creating a thin film of water that flows past the root mass. At the low end, the solution drains back into a central reservoir where it's filtered, reoxygenated, and pumped back to channels. The cycle is continuous. The key word here is film. The solution layer is typically only a few millimeters deep. It's not a flood. The roots are not submerged. Instead, they sit in a shallow stream of nutrient-rich water, with the upper portion of the root mass exposed to the humid air inside the channel. This provides the ideal combination: constant access to water and nutrients with excellent oxygenation. NFT works exceptionally well for fast-growing, shallow-rooted crops. Lettuce is the classic example. A lettuce plant in an NFT system can go from seed to harvest in 30 to 40 days, depending on variety and conditions. Basil, cilantro, arugula, pak choi, and other leafy greens also thrive. These crops have relatively small root systems and high water demand, which NFT delivers efficiently. But NFT has limitations. It's less suitable for large, heavy, or long-season crops. A tomato plant, for instance, develops a massive root system that can clog the channel. The plant itself can become top-heavy and difficult to support. Fruiting crops also require more space between plants, which reduces the efficiency advantage of NFT. The system is also vulnerable to disruption. Because the film of water is so thin, roots can dry out quickly if the pump fails or the flow stops. In a commercial operation, a backup pump and alarm system are standard. Even a brief interruption during a hot day can stress or kill plants. This makes NFT less forgiving than systems where roots are surrounded by moist growing media that provides a buffer. Another challenge is maintaining the correct slope. NFT channels must be level along their width, but sloped along their length. Too much slope, and the solution flows too fast, giving roots less time to absorb nutrients. Too little slope and the solution pools, creating low oxygen zones where roots can rot. Most systems use a slope of 1 to 2%, which translates to about 1 to 2 centimeters of drop per meter of channel length. Channel length also matters. If the channel is too long, plants at the far end may receive nutrient solution that's been partially depleted by upstream plants. Commercial systems typically limit channel length to 10 to 15 meters and use multiple parallel channels fed from the same reservoir. Temperature control is critical in NFT. Because the film is thin and exposed, it warms up quickly under greenhouse conditions. If the solution temperature exceeds 22 degrees Celsius, dissolved oxygen drops and root disease becomes more likely. Many operations use insulated channels, chilled reservoirs, or evaporative cooling to manage temperature. Despite these challenges, NFT remains popular because of its efficiency. Water use is minimal. There's no growing medium to buy, replace, or dispose of. The system is easy to clean between crop cycles. And because the solution is recirculated, nutrient waste is low. Commercial lettuce farms using NFT can produce 15 to 20 harvests per year from the same infrastructure, with yields per square meter far exceeding what's possible in field production. NFT is a perfect example of how hydroponics trades simplicity for control. The system itself is simple, but managing it well requires attention to detail, monitoring, and responsiveness. When it's done right, the results are remarkable. Uniform, high-quality greens grown with a fraction of the water and land that conventional farming requires. One of the most common questions from people new to hydroponics is, if there's no soil, what keeps the plant from falling over? The answer is growing media, but it's important to understand what growing media is and what it isn't. Growing media in hydroponics is inert. It provides physical support and holds moisture, but it contributes no nutrients. This is fundamentally different from potting soil or compost, which are biologically active and contain organic matter that breaks down to release nutrients. In hydroponics, nutrition comes exclusively from the water. The growing medium is just structure. Let's look at the most common types. Rock wool is one of the most widely used media in commercial hydroponics. It's made from molten rock, usually basalt, that's spun into fibers like cotton candy, then compressed into blocks or slabs. The result is a lightweight, porous material that holds a lot of water while still allowing air to penetrate. Rock wool is sterile, consistent, and has good capillary action, meaning water moves through it evenly. It's the standard for propagating seedlings and for growing fruiting crops like tomatoes and peppers in drip or slab systems. The downside is that rock wool is not biodegradable. After use, it must be disposed of, though some operations recycle it as insulation or aggregate. It also has a naturally high pH, so it must be pre-soaked in acidic water before use. Coconut coir or cocoa peat is a byproduct of coconut processing. It's made from the fibrous husk of coconuts, ground and processed into a peat-like material. Coir is renewable, biodegradable, and has excellent water retention. It's lighter than rock wool and more environmentally friendly. It works well in drip systems, ebb and flow, and containers. However, coir can vary in quality. Low-quality coir may contain high levels of salts, especially sodium and chloride, which need to be flushed out before use. It also breaks down over time, so it's typically used for 1 or 2 crop cycles before being composted. Perlite is a volcanic glass that's been heated until it expands into lightweight, white granules. It's extremely porous and provides excellent aeration. Perlite doesn't hold as much water as rock wool or coir, so it's often mixed with other media or used in systems with frequent watering, like drip or ebb and flow. It's inexpensive, reusable after sterilization, and widely available. The main drawback is that it's dusty when dry, so it should be dampened before handling to avoid inhaling particles. Expanded clay pellets, often sold under brand names like Hydroponics, are small, round pellets made from clay that's been heated in a kiln. They're chemically inert, reusable, and provide excellent drainage and aeration. They're commonly used in ebb and flow systems, DWC net pots, and Dutch bucket systems. The pellets don't degrade, so they can be cleaned and reused many times. However, they don't hold much water, so they're best suited for systems with frequent watering cycles. Some systems use no medium at all. In NFT, plants sit in net pots with roots dangling into the channel. In DWC, net pots hold the plant while roots grow down into the reservoir. In aeroponics, roots are completely bare, suspended in air. In these cases, the net pot itself, often filled with just a small amount of perlite or clay pellets, provides enough support for young plants. As the plant matures, the roots themselves provide anchorage. The choice of growing medium depends on the system, the crop, and the grower's priorities. Rock wool offers consistency and performance, but has environmental concerns. Coir is sustainable but requires quality control. Perlite is versatile but needs frequent watering. Clay pellets are reusable but expensive up front. What all of these media have in common is that they get out of the way. They don't interfere with nutrient delivery. They don't harbor pests or diseases if managed properly, and they give the grower control. In soil, you're working with a living, changing substrate. In hydroponics, the medium is predictable. It does its job and nothing more. That predictability is part of what makes hydroponics so effective. Hydroponics changes how plants access water and nutrients, but it doesn't change the fundamental process that keeps them alive: photosynthesis. Plants still need light, lots of it, and the quality, intensity, and duration of that light directly determine how fast they grow and how much they produce. Photosynthesis is the process by which plants convert light energy into chemical energy. Chlorophyll in the leaves absorbs light, primarily in the blue and red wavelengths. That energy is used to split water molecules, releasing oxygen and producing sugars from carbon dioxide and water. Those sugars fuel growth, reproduction, and all metabolic processes. In outdoor soil-based farming, sunlight is free and abundant, at least during the growing season. In hydroponics, light can come from the sun from artificial lights, or from a combination of both. Greenhouse hydroponic operations rely primarily on natural sunlight. Modern greenhouses are designed to maximize light transmission using high-clarity glass or polyethylene film. They're oriented to capture sunlight throughout the day and often include supplemental lighting for cloudy days or short winter daylight periods. Tomatoes, cucumbers, and peppers grown in commercial greenhouses receive a mix of natural and artificial light, with metal halide or high-pressure sodium lamps historically providing supplemental light. Increasingly, LED grow lights are taking over because they're more efficient and can be tuned to specific light spectra. Indoor hydroponic operations like vertical farms or warehouse grows rely entirely on artificial lighting. There's no sunlight. Every photon comes from a lamp. This gives complete control over the light spectrum, intensity, and photoperiod, but also means electricity is a major operating cost. Lighting can account for 30 to 50% of total energy use in an indoor farm. Plants don't need all wavelengths of light equally. Photosynthesis is driven primarily by blue light, which is around 450 nanometers, and red light, which is around 660 nanometers. Green light, in the middle of the spectrum, is largely reflected, which is why plants look green. Early LED grow lights focused almost exclusively on red and blue, giving off a purple glow. Modern full-spectrum LEDs include green and other wavelengths to provide more balanced light that's easier on human eyes and supports broader plant physiological functions. Light intensity matters as much as spectrum. It's measured in micromoles per square meter per second, or ppfd, which stand for photosynthetic photon flux density. Leafy greens like lettuce need around 200 to 300 ppfd to grow well. Fruiting crops like tomatoes need 600 to 1,000 or more. Too little light, and growth slows, stems stretch, and yields drop. Too much light can cause photoinhibition, where a plant's photosynthetic machinery becomes damaged. Photoperiod, the length of the light period each day, also affects growth and development. Most leafy greens do well with 16 to 18 hours of light per day. Fruiting crops often need 12 to 14 hours, and some plants require specific day lengths to trigger flowering. Strawberries, for example, are day-neutral or short-day plants, depending on the variety, meaning they flower based on day length. One advantage of hydroponics in controlled environments is that light is consistent. There are no cloudy days, no seasonal changes, no shading from trees or buildings. This allows year-round production with predictable growth rates. A head of lettuce in an indoor farm takes the same amount of time to mature in January as it does in July, because the light environment doesn't change. But this consistency comes at a cost. LEDs are efficient, but they still consume a lot of power, and they generate heat, which must be removed through ventilation or air conditioning, adding more energy cost. This is why indoor vertical farms are most economically viable for high-value, fast-growing crops like herbs and leafy greens. With the premium prices justify the energy input, light is also a tool for quality control. Red light promotes compact, sturdy growth. Blue light enhances flavor compounds and pigmentation in some crops. Far red light can speed flowering. By adjusting the light spectrum during different growth stages, growers can steer plant development toward desired outcomes. Whether the light comes from the sun or from LEDs, the principle is the same. Light energy is captured by chlorophyll, converted to chemical energy, and used to build plant tissue. Hydroponics provides the water and nutrients. Light provides the energy. Together, they create the conditions for growth that can exceed anything possible in traditional soil-based systems. Hydroponics gives growers precise control over water and nutrients, but that control is wasted if the environment isn't also managed. Temperature and humidity are as critical to plant health as anything in the nutrient solution. Let's start with water temperature. We've already discussed the link between temperature and dissolved oxygen. Warm water holds less oxygen. Below 15 degrees Celsius, dissolved oxygen is high, but plant metabolism slows. Above 25 degrees, metabolism may be fine, but oxygen drops and root disease risk increases. The sweet spot for most hydroponic crops is 18 to 21 degrees Celsius. This range supports healthy metabolism, good nutrient uptake, and adequate oxygenation. Maintaining this temperature range isn't always easy. In a greenhouse on a hot summer day, the nutrient reservoir can heat up quickly. Large commercial operations use water chillers, which are essentially refrigeration units that cool the nutrient solution. Smaller setups might rely on insulated reservoirs, shade cloth, or placing the reservoir in a cooler part of the building. In cold climates, water temperature can drop too low, especially in unheated greenhouses. Aquarium heaters or heat exchangers can be used to warm the solution. Air temperature is equally important. Each crop has an optimal temperature range. Lettuce grows best between 15 and 20 degrees Celsius. Tomatoes prefer 20 to 25 degrees during the day and slightly cooler at night. Cucumbers like it even warmer, up to 28 degrees. If temperatures are too low, growth slows and plants become susceptible to cold stress and disease. If temperatures are too high, plants transpire excessively, respiration outpaces photosynthesis, and yields drop. Temperature also affects nutrient uptake. At low temperatures, root activity slows and nutrient absorption decreases. At high temperatures, transpiration increases, which can pull in more nutrients than the plant needs, leading to salt accumulation or nutrient imbalances. Day and night temperature differentials, called DIF, influence plant morphology. A positive DIF, where day temperature is higher than night temperature, promotes stem elongation. A negative DIF, where nights are warmer than days, produces more compact growth. Some growers manipulate DIF to control plant height and structure. Humidity is a percentage of water vapor in the air. It affects transpiration rate, which drives nutrient uptake. In low humidity, plants transpire rapidly. This can lead to water stress and excessive nutrient uptake. In high humidity, transpiration slows. This can limit nutrient uptake, especially of calcium, which moves with water flow. High humidity also promotes fungal diseases like powdery mildew and botrytis. Most hydroponic crops do best at 50 to 70% relative humidity. Leafy greens tolerate higher humidity. Fruiting crops prefer it slightly lower, especially during flowering and fruiting, to reduce disease pressure. Controlling humidity requires ventilation and sometimes dehumidification. Greenhouses use fans, vents, and evaporative cooling to manage air exchange and humidity. Indoor farms use HVAC systems with precise humidity control. In very dry climates, humidifiers may be needed. In humid climates, dehumidifiers are essential. Air circulation is also important. Stagnant air allows humidity pockets to form and prevents carbon dioxide from reaching leaf surfaces. Fans keep air moving, which strengthens stems through mechanical stimulation, distributes temperature and humidity evenly, and reduces disease pressure. Carbon dioxide concentration affects photosynthesis. Outdoor air contains about 400 parts per million CO2. In a sealed greenhouse or indoor farm, plants can deplete CO2 during the day, slowing photosynthesis. Supplementing CO2 to 800 to 1200 ppm can increase growth rates by 20 to 30%, especially in high-light environments. CO2 enrichment is common in commercial greenhouse production, but requires careful monitoring to avoid waste and to ensure worker safety. All of these environmental factors interact. High temperature increases transpiration, which increases nutrient uptake, but also increases water demand. Low humidity at high temperature can cause wilting even in a well-watered hydroponic system. High CO2 without adequate light doesn't help. Low light at ideal temperature wastes energy. Managing the environment is about creating balance. The goal is to keep all factors within ranges that support optimal photosynthesis, respiration, and nutrient uptake. When that balance is achieved, growth is fast, yields are high, and plant health is excellent. When it's off, even a perfectly managed nutrient solution won't compensate. This is why commercial hydroponic operations invest heavily in environmental control systems. Sensors monitor temperature, humidity, light, and CO2 continuously. Automated systems adjust heating, cooling, ventilation, and lighting in real time. Data is logged and analyzed to optimize settings for each crop and growth stage. For small-scale growers, the same principles apply, just with simpler tools. A thermometer, a hygrometer, a fan, and attention to plant signals can go a long way. The key is understanding that hydroponics isn't just about the roots. It's about the whole plant, in its whole environment. One of the most striking things about hydroponics is the growth rate. A lettuce plant that takes 60 days to mature in soil can be ready in 35 days in a hydroponic system. Tomatoes start producing fruit weeks earlier. Basil grows so fast you can harvest it multiple times in a season. This isn't magic. It's efficiency. In soil-based agriculture, a plant's root system is constantly searching. Roots grow outward and downward, probing for pockets of moisture and nutrients. This exploration requires energy. The plant invests carbohydrates, produced through photosynthesis, into building and maintaining an extensive root network. In poor soils, the root system can be larger than the above-ground plant. In hydroponics, this search is unnecessary. Water and nutrients are delivered directly to the roots in optimal concentrations. The plant doesn't need to build a massive root system. It can allocate more energy to shoot growth, leaf production, and fruit development. Root-to-shoot ratios in hydroponic systems are often lower than in soil, meaning more of the plant's biomass goes into the parts we care about. Nutrient availability is also constant. In soil, nutrients are released slowly through microbial activity, mineralization, and decomposition. Availability fluctuates with temperature, moisture, and soil chemistry. There can be periods of abundance followed by periods of deficiency. This variability slows growth. In hydroponics, nutrients are always present at target concentrations. The plant is never waiting for the next rain or the next fertilizer application. It can photosynthesize and grow at maximum capacity every day, as long as environmental conditions allow. This is like the difference between eating 3 balanced meals a day versus scrounging for food at irregular intervals. The consistency supports steady, rapid growth. Water availability follows the same logic. In soil, water is held in pore spaces and released as the soil dries. Plants experience wet-dry cycles. During dry periods, they close their stomata to conserve water, which reduces photosynthesis and slows growth. In hydroponics, water is always available. Stomata stay open. Transpiration is continuous. Photosynthesis runs at full speed. Oxygenation is also superior in well-managed hydroponic systems. Soil can become compacted or waterlogged, reducing oxygen availability. In hydroponics, root oxygenation is actively managed through aeration, flow, or exposure to air. Healthy, well-oxygenated roots absorb nutrients more efficiently and grow more vigorously. The result is faster vegetative growth, earlier flowering, and higher yields. Studies consistently show that hydroponic crops produce 20 to 30% more biomass per plant than soil-grown equivalents under the same environmental conditions. In controlled environments with optimized light, temperature, and CO2, the difference can be even greater. Growth is also more uniform. In a field, soil variability means some plants get more nutrients or water than others. You end up with a mix of large, medium, and small plants. In hydroponics, every plant receives the same inputs. Uniformity is high. This makes harvesting more efficient and improves marketability. When every head of lettuce is the same size and quality, there's less waste and better pricing. Faster growth translates to shorter crop cycles, which means more harvest per year from the same infrastructure. A greenhouse using hydroponics can produce 12 to 15 lettuce crops annually, compared to 3 to 4 in field production. This increases revenue per square meter and improves return on investment. But speed isn't the only benefit. Faster growth also means less time for pests and diseases to establish. A crop that goes from seed to harvest in 5 weeks has less exposure to aphids, caterpillars, or fungal pathogens than one that takes 12 weeks. This reduces the need for pesticides and improves food safety. It's important to note that faster growth doesn't mean lower quality. In fact, hydroponic crops are often higher quality. They're cleaner because they're not grown in soil. They have fewer blemishes and less damage from pests. Nutrient content can be controlled to optimize flavor, color, and shelf life. Lettuce grown hydroponically tends to be crisper and less bitter. Herbs are more aromatic. Tomatoes can be vine ripened because there's no need to harvest early for long-distance shipping. The speed and efficiency of hydroponic growth are what make the economics work. especially in high-cost environments like urban areas or regions with poor soil. The higher upfront investment in infrastructure is offset by higher productivity, faster turnover, and premium pricing for high-quality, locally grown produce. Hydroponics doesn't make plants grow faster by changing their biology. It makes them grow faster by removing limitations. It gives them everything they need when they need it in the form they can use most easily. The plant does what it evolved to do. It just does it more efficiently. Water is becoming one of the most critical constraints in global agriculture. Aquifers are being depleted. Rivers are running dry. Droughts are more frequent and severe. Agriculture accounts for 70% of global freshwater use, and much of that water is wasted through evaporation, runoff, and deep percolation beyond the root zone. Hydroponics offers a fundamentally different approach to water use. In a well-managed hydroponic system, water use can be reduced by 70 to 90% compared to conventional soil-based farming. This isn't an exaggeration. It's been documented in research and commercial operations worldwide. Let's break down where the savings come from. In soil-based irrigation, water is applied to the surface and must infiltrate down to the root zone. Much of it evaporates before it reaches the roots, especially in hot, arid climates. Some percolates past the root zone and is lost to deep drainage. Some runs off the surface, carrying soil and fertilizer with it. Even with efficient drip irrigation, a significant percentage of applied water never reaches the plant. In hydroponics, water is delivered directly to the roots in a closed or semi-closed system. There's no soil to absorb and hold water. There's minimal evaporation from the surface because the nutrient solution is contained in channels, reservoirs, or covered trays. And in recirculating systems, any water the plant doesn't absorb is collected and reused. This recirculation is key. In an NFT system, for example, nutrient solution flows past the roots and drains back into a reservoir. It's filtered, reoxygenated, adjusted for pH and EC, and pumped back to the channels. The only water lost is what the plant absorbs and transpires, plus a small amount from evaporation in the reservoir and system maintenance. A commercial lettuce operation using NFT might use 5 to 10 liters of water per kilogram of lettuce produced, compared to 50 to 80 liters per kilogram in field production. Even in non-recirculating systems, like drip-to-waste on rock wool slabs, water use is much lower than soil because the application is precise. The grower knows exactly how much water each plant needs based on its growth stage, the weather, and the crop type. There's no guesswork. And because the growing medium is sterile and doesn't harbor weeds, there's no competition for water. Humidity management also plays a role. In controlled environment hydroponics, humidity from plant transpiration is often captured by dehumidifiers and can be recycled back into the system or used elsewhere in the facility. This closed-loop approach further reduces water demand. Water savings have economic and environmental implications. In water-scarce regions, access to water is a limiting factor for agriculture. Hydroponics enables food production in deserts, on degraded land, or in urban areas where water is expensive. Israel, one of the driest countries in the world, is a leader in hydroponic greenhouse production for exactly this reason. Water efficiency also reduces the energy costs of pumping, treating, and distributing water. It reduces runoff into waterways, which carries fertilizers and pesticides that cause algae blooms and aquatic dead zones. And it reduces competition between agriculture and urban water users, which is a growing source of conflict in many regions. But water efficiency in hydroponics is not automatic. It requires good system design and management. Leaks must be prevented. Reservoirs must be covered to prevent evaporation. Irrigation schedules must match plant needs, not exceed them. Water quality must be monitored to prevent salt buildup, which can necessitate flushing the system and wasting water. In hot climates, evaporative cooling is sometimes used to cool greenhouses, which consumes water. But even with this, total water use is still far below field irrigation. Another consideration is the source of water. Hydroponics can use lower quality water than soil-based farming because the grower has more control over nutrient composition. Brackish water, treated wastewater, or desalinated water can all be used if properly managed. This opens up water sources that would be unsuitable for conventional irrigation. Water efficiency is one of the strongest arguments for hydroponics in a future shaped by climate change and population growth. As fresh water becomes scarcer and more expensive, farming systems that use less of it will have a competitive advantage. Hydroponics is not a complete solution to global water challenges, but it's a significant part of the toolkit. The 70 to 90% reduction in water use is not just a theoretical possibility. It's being achieved right now in commercial operations from California to the Netherlands to the Middle East. And as water scarcity intensifies, the economic and environmental case for hydroponic production will only get stronger. Hydroponics works for a wide range of crops, but some are far more common than others. The crops that dominate commercial hydroponic production share certain characteristics: high value, fast growth, compact size, or year-round demand. Let's look at the most widely grown hydroponic crops and why they're well suited to soil-free systems. Lettuce is the king of hydroponic production. It grows fast, typically 30 to 40 days from transplant to harvest. It has a shallow root system that works well in NFT and DWC systems. It thrives in controlled environments with moderate temperatures and doesn't require high light intensity. Most importantly, it commands a premium price when sold as fresh, locally grown, pesticide-free greens. Varieties like butterhead, romaine, and red leaf lettuce are all common. Hydroponic lettuce operations range from small urban farms selling to restaurants to massive greenhouse complexes producing millions of heads per year for retail chains. Herbs are another staple. Basil, cilantro, parsley, mint, and other culinary herbs have high value per kilogram and are sold fresh, which means local production has a major advantage over long-distance shipping. Herbs also tolerate high-density planting and can be harvested multiple times before replanting. Basil, in particular, is one of the most profitable hydroponic crops. It grows quickly, has strong demand, and handles well post-harvest. Leafy greens beyond lettuce also do well. Pak choi, arugula, kale, Swiss chard, and spinach are all grown hydroponically. They have similar requirements to lettuce and fit into the same systems and production schedules. Asian greens like mizuna and mustard greens are increasingly popular in urban hydroponic farms, serving diverse markets. Tomatoes are the most widely grown hydroponic fruiting crop. Commercial greenhouse tomato production is a huge industry, particularly in Canada, the Netherlands, and Mexico. Tomatoes grown hydroponically, usually on rock wool slabs with drip irrigation, can produce yields of 50 to 70 kilograms per square meter per year in well-managed greenhouses. That's multiple times higher than field production. The fruit quality is excellent, with uniform size, color, and flavor. Hydroponic tomatoes are typically vine-ripened, which improves taste compared to field-grown tomatoes that are picked green and ripened during shipping. Varieties are selected for greenhouse conditions, with indeterminate types that grow continuously and produce over a long season. Cucumbers are similar to tomatoes in their requirements and performance. European-style seedless cucumbers are the most common. They grow rapidly, produce heavily, and have high market value. Greenhouse cucumbers are crisp, uniform, and have thin skins, which consumers prefer. They're grown on vertical trellises in greenhouses using drip irrigation on rockwool or coir. Peppers, both sweet bell peppers and hot peppers, are also grown hydroponically. They take longer to produce than tomatoes or cucumbers, but they have strong market demand and good prices. Red, yellow, and orange bell peppers, which are simply ripened green peppers, command premium prices and are well suited to controlled environments. Strawberries are an emerging hydroponic crop. Traditionally grown in soil, strawberries are now being produced in vertical hydroponic systems, tabletop gutters, and tower systems. This keeps the fruit off the ground, reduces disease pressure, makes harvesting easier, and allows year-round production. Hydroponic strawberries are clean, pest-free, and often sweeter than field-grown fruit. Other crops grown hydroponically include melons, especially small varieties like cantaloupe, and even flowers like Gerber daisies and orchids. In research settings, potatoes, beans, and grains have been grown hydroponically, though they're not yet commercially viable due to low value per unit area. What all of these crops have in common is that they benefit from the control and efficiency hydroponics provides. They're either high value enough to justify the infrastructure cost or productive enough to generate strong returns. They respond well to precise nutrient management, consistent watering, and environmental control. There are crops hydroponics doesn't work well for. Root crops like carrots and potatoes are challenging because the root is the harvested part, and hydroponic systems are designed around root health, not root harvest. Field crops like wheat, corn, and soybeans have low value per unit and require too much space and too long a growing season to be economically viable in hydroponic systems. But for the crops it does work for, hydroponics is increasingly competitive with or superior to soil-based production. As technology improves, costs decline, and consumer demand for local, sustainable, high-quality produce grows, the list of commercially viable hydroponic crops will likely expand. Hydroponics is forgiving in some ways and unforgiving in others. A small mistake in soil-based gardening might slow growth or reduce yield. The same mistake in hydroponics can kill the crop. Understanding the most common beginner errors can save a lot of frustration and lost plants. The first and most common mistake is poor root oxygenation. Beginners often assume that because hydroponics uses water, they can just submerge the roots and walk away. But roots need oxygen. Without it, they suffocate, turn brown and slimy, and the plant dies. This happens most often in DWC systems where the air pump fails or wasn't strong enough to begin with. It also happens in NFT systems where the flow is too slow or the channels are too flat, allowing solution to pool and stagnate. The fix is simple. Use an adequately sized air pump, keep water temperature below 22 degrees, and ensure good flow or drainage in all systems. The second mistake is neglecting pH. Beginners either don't check it at all, or check it once and assume it stays constant, but pH drifts. As plants absorb nutrients, they change the solution chemistry. As water evaporates, concentrations shift. pH can swing from 6 to 8 in just a day or two. When pH is outside the optimal range of 5.5 to 6.5, nutrients become unavailable. The plant shows deficiency symptoms, even though the nutrients are present. The solution is to check pH daily and adjust as needed. Use a reliable pH meter. Calibrate it regularly and make small adjustments with pH up or pH down solutions. The third mistake is overfeeding nutrients. More is not better. Beginners often think that if a little nutrient solution is good, a lot must be even better. But high EC causes osmotic stress, nutrient imbalances, and root burn. Symptoms include leaf tip burn, stunted growth, and wilting even when roots are wet. The correct approach is to follow the nutrient manufacturer's recommendations, measure EC regularly, and adjust based on plant response. Seedlings need lower EC than mature plants. Leafy greens need less than fruiting crops, and it's easier to add nutrients than to remove them. A related mistake is not changing the reservoir often enough. Over time, nutrients get depleted at different rates. The solution becomes unbalanced. Salts accumulate. Pathogens can build up. Beginners sometimes try to stretch the solution for weeks, just topping up with water and nutrients. This works for a while, but eventually the system crashes. The best practice is to dump and replace the reservoir completely every 1 to 2 weeks, depending on system size and crop demand. Another common error is ignoring water temperature. Warm water promotes root disease and reduces oxygen. Beginners in hot climates often lose crops to pythium or root rot because their reservoir heats up to 25 or 30 degrees. The solution is insulation, shade, or a water chiller. Even placing frozen water bottles in the reservoir can help in small systems. Lighting mistakes are also frequent. Beginners either use inadequate light, leading to stretched, weak plants, or they place lights too close, causing heat stress or light burn. They also sometimes run lights 24 hours a day, thinking more light equals more growth. But plants need a dark period for metabolic processes. 16 to 18 hours is typically optimal for leafy greens. Fruiting crops often do better with 12 to 14 hours. Neglecting cleanliness is another problem. Algae grow in nutrient solution when exposed to light. It competes with plants for nutrients and oxygen. Biofilm builds up on roots, tubing, and reservoir walls. This harbors pathogens and reduces system efficiency. Beginners often let systems get dirty, then wonder why plants decline. The fix is to use opaque tubing and reservoirs, block light from entering the system, and clean all components between crops. Finally, beginners often choose the wrong system for their experience level. They jump straight into aeroponics or complex multi-zone systems without understanding the basics. Aeroponics is efficient but requires constant monitoring and backup systems. NFT is productive but vulnerable to pump failure. A beginner is better off starting with DWC or a simple drip system, learning the fundamentals of pH, EC, and nutrient management, and then scaling up to more advanced setups. Hydroponics is not difficult, but it does require attention and consistency. The plants are entirely dependent on the grower. There's no soil buffer to smooth out mistakes, but that also means problems are easy to spot and easy to fix if you know what to look for. Most beginner failures come from ignorance or neglect, not from flaws in the system. With proper research, good monitoring habits, and a willingness to learn from mistakes, even a complete beginner can succeed with hydroponics. The question of whether hydroponics is organic or sustainable comes up frequently, and the answers are more complicated than many people expect. Let's start with organic. In the traditional sense, organic agriculture is defined by working with natural systems. It emphasizes soil health, biodiversity, composting, crop rotation, and the use of natural inputs rather than synthetic chemicals. The core philosophy is that healthy soil creates healthy plants, which create healthy food. Hydroponics challenges this philosophy because there is no soil. Nutrients come from water-soluble salts, which are often synthetically manufactured. There's no composting, no soil microbes, no ecosystem. For purists, this disqualifies hydroponics from being organic, regardless of what inputs are used. But organic certification is not about philosophy. It's about standards, and those standards vary by country and certifying body. In the United States, the USDA National Organic Program does allow hydroponic systems to be certified organic, as long as they meet the program's requirements. This has been controversial. Many soil-based organic farmers argue that hydroponics undermines the principles of organic agriculture. But the USDA's position is that the standards are input-based, not system-based. If a hydroponic operation uses approved inputs, avoids prohibited substances, and follows organic handling practices, it can be certified. In Canada, the situation is similar. The Canadian organic standards allow hydroponics under certain conditions. In Europe, the rules are stricter. The European Union generally does not allow soil-free systems to be certified organic, though there are exceptions for some production methods. In other countries, the rules vary widely. For growers, this creates a patchwork of regulations. A hydroponic greenhouse in California can label its tomatoes organic. The same greenhouse in France cannot. This inconsistency frustrates both producers and consumers. There's also a distinction between conventional hydroponics, which uses synthetic nutrients, and organic hydroponics, which uses nutrients derived from natural sources like fish emulsion, seaweed extract, or compost tea. Organic hydroponics is technically feasible but more challenging. Organic nutrient solutions are less stable, harder to balance, and more expensive. They also carry a higher risk of pathogen contamination if derived from animal products. Now let's talk about sustainability, which is a separate question. Sustainability is about resource use, environmental impact, and long-term viability. By most measures, hydroponics is more sustainable than conventional soil-based agriculture. Water use is drastically lower, as we've discussed. Nutrient runoff, a major source of water pollution in conventional farming, is minimized or eliminated in recirculating systems. Pesticide use is lower because controlled environments reduce pest pressure. There's no soil erosion, no tillage, and no loss of soil organic matter. Land use efficiency is much higher, meaning more food is produced per hectare. And because hydroponics can be done in urban areas, it reduces transportation emissions by bringing production closer to consumers. But hydroponics is not without environmental costs. Energy use can be high, especially in indoor systems that rely entirely on artificial lighting. The production and disposal of plastic components, growing media, and infrastructure all have environmental footprints. And the reliance on synthetic inputs, even if they're used efficiently, is a point of concern for some. The sustainability of hydroponics depends on the energy source. A greenhouse powered by renewable energy, using natural sunlight and recirculating nutrients, has a much lower environmental impact than an indoor vertical farm powered by coal and using single-use plastics. Context matters. There's also a social dimension to sustainability. Hydroponics can provide food security in regions with poor soil or water scarcity. It can create jobs in urban areas. But it can also displace small-scale farmers if large corporate hydroponic operations undercut local markets. The economics and social impacts vary depending on scale, ownership, and market conditions. So is hydroponics organic? It depends on who you ask and where you are. Is it sustainable? It can be, but it's not automatically so. Like any agricultural system, it has trade-offs. The key is to evaluate it honestly, use it where it makes sense, and continue improving its efficiency and environmental performance. What's clear is that hydroponics is a tool, not a solution in itself. How it's used determines its value. When done well, it can be part of a more sustainable food system. When done poorly, it's just another industrial process with environmental and social costs. The challenge is to maximize the benefits and minimize the harms. Hydroponics is not new, but its role in the global food system is changing. For most of human history, agriculture meant soil. Food came from fields. But the pressures of the 21st century, climate change, urbanization, water scarcity, population growth, are pushing agriculture into new forms. Hydroponics is one of the most promising. Urban farming is where hydroponics is making its most visible impact. Cities are growing. By 2050, nearly 70% of the global population will live in urban areas. These cities depend on food grown hundreds or 1,000 kilometers away, shipped in trucks, trains, and planes. This system is fragile. It's vulnerable to fuel prices, supply chain disruptions, and climate shocks. And it's wasteful. Fresh produce loses nutritional value and flavor during long transport and storage. Hydroponics enables food production within cities. Rooftop greenhouses, vertical farms and warehouses, and small-scale community systems are producing lettuce, herbs, tomatoes, and other crops in the heart of urban areas. The food is fresher, the carbon footprint is lower, and the economic benefits stay local. Companies like Aero Farms, Gotham Greens, and Infarm have built successful businesses around urban hydroponic production. The model is still evolving, but it's proven viable in markets willing to pay a premium for ultra-fresh, locally grown produce. Climate resilience is another driver. Traditional agriculture is increasingly disrupted by extreme weather. Droughts, floods, heat waves, and unseasonal frost damage crops and reduce yields. Hydroponics, especially in controlled environments, is insulated from most of these risks. A greenhouse in Arizona can produce tomatoes in the middle of summer. An indoor farm in Minnesota can grow basil in January. The weather doesn't matter. This stability is valuable in a world where climate unpredictability is the new normal. Water scarcity, already discussed, will only intensify. Regions that can't support conventional irrigation may turn to hydroponics as a way to maintain food production. The Middle East, North Africa, and parts of Asia are already investing heavily in greenhouse hydroponics for this reason. Food security is another critical issue. Global population is projected to reach 9 to 10 billion by 2050. Feeding that many people will require either expanding agricultural land, which drives deforestation and biodiversity loss, or increasing productivity on existing land. Hydroponics increases productivity dramatically. It produces more food per square meter, per liter of water, and per kilogram of fertilizer than conventional farming. It's not a replacement for field agriculture, but it's a valuable complement, especially for high-value crops. Year-round production is a major economic and nutritional advantage. Seasonal cycles limit what can be grown and when. Hydroponics breaks that constraint. Consumers want fresh strawberries and basil in winter. Hydroponics delivers. This isn't just about convenience. It's about stable supply chains, predictable pricing, and reducing reliance on imports from distant countries with different food safety standards. Technology is also advancing. Automation, sensors, data analytics, and artificial intelligence are making hydroponic systems smarter and more efficient. Systems can now monitor and adjust pH, EC, temperature, humidity, and light in real time with minimal human intervention. Machine learning algorithms optimize nutrient formulas and predict harvest dates. Robotics handle planting, harvesting, and packaging. These innovations reduce labor costs, improve consistency, and make hydroponics viable at larger scales. Vertical farming, a subset of hydroponics, is pushing the boundaries further. By stacking growing layers vertically, vertical farms achieve productivity per square meter that's many times higher than greenhouses. They're also completely independent of weather and can be built anywhere, from Singapore to Iceland. The economics are still challenging due to high energy costs. But as LED efficiency improves and renewable energy becomes cheaper, vertical farming will become more competitive. There are also social and educational dimensions. Hydroponics is being taught in schools to introduce students to agriculture, biology, and sustainability. Community hydroponic projects are providing fresh food in food deserts and low-income neighborhoods. The technology is accessible enough that individuals can build small systems at home, growing their own herbs and greens. But the future of hydroponics is not without challenges. Energy use remains a concern, especially for indoor systems. The initial capital investment is high, which limits access for small-scale farmers. Regulatory frameworks are still catching up, particularly around organic certification and food safety. And there's resistance from traditional agriculture sectors that see hydroponics as competition rather than complement. The path forward is integration. Hydroponics won't replace soil-based farming, nor should it. Field agriculture is essential for grains, legumes, root crops, and many other staples. But hydroponics fills gaps. It provides fresh produce in cities. It grows food in harsh climates. It conserves water in arid regions. It stabilizes supply chains. It responds to consumer demand for quality, safety, and sustainability. Soil-free farming is not a distant vision. It's here now. It's feeding people in Dubai and Detroit, in Tokyo and Toronto. It's a tool for adapting to a changing world. And as the challenges of climate, population, and resource scarcity intensify, the role of hydroponics in feeding humanity will only grow. The future of farming is not soil versus hydroponics. It's both working together, optimized for their respective strengths, contributing to a more resilient and sustainable food system. Hydroponics is part of that future, and it's a future that's already begun.